Okay, hi everyone. I'm so excited. Thank you so much. I'm just gonna wait for 1 minute, but a couple more people are gonna join. But essentially, I'm just gonna start presenting and uh, setting up the situation. You have the chat if you wanna interact or ask because I'm recording this session. And I remember when we did the recordings, we um, save the first part of the session to um, sort of like present. So none of the things in the chat will get recorded. So I'm so excited to welcome Denise and Charlotte. Thank you so much. This is so exciting and just beyond. Yeah, thanks, Charlotte. Um, just a quick, sort of like a few things. I'm gonna start another camera. Uh, Hold on. And I'm just going to. Okay, so I'll start. Thanks for joining us, Jen. I'll start another camera in a second. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm, I'm great. Thank you so much. Long time no see. I saw you last night. So,
I've missed you, friend.
um,
Hi, Darlene. Oh my gosh, so fun. Hi,
this
Denise.
is so good. It's so important. So we just decided to set this up once a month, which I think is doable. The first session we didn't record, but know that in moving forward in the future, 2025 and beyond, we'll record every session, we'll upload it on YouTube, and there's going to be a private link that everyone's going to have in case you miss or you can attend our sessions that specific second Friday of every month. And we'll just present the first hour and a half and the second we'll stop the recording, and then the last half an hour we'll open the microphones and videos, so none of that will be recorded. The very interesting feature that I didn't know about, it's that the chat that you have right here, it doesn't go away. I mean, I don't know if that's good or bad. It is good, but it's actually really smart because um, you have the chance to um, see anything that we shared. If you didn't get a chance to watch the video, even if you haven't attended and you want to see what happened, you can scroll through the chat. The link is going to be always the same. So the email that we sent to you with the link, that chat window should open in your app, and know that you can continue adding information, questions, um, work in progress on the chat because it doesn't close. So before the session, if you want to just do that and then type if you're just doing something specifically, if you're starting something from scratch. After the session, when we close the video and everything, the chat link still is on, and everyone who participated has the capability of continuing adding notes, or if you have any questions, if you go buy a material and you don't know which uh, supply or which brand, and so know that we have access to that chat ourselves as well. So um, yeah, and another feature that also is very interesting, you can share your work in progress by just dumping the image on the chat. So you don't have to text and you don't have to message. So the chat allows you to actually have any image that you are using, any photograph, and you can just add it to the chat and we'll see it. So it's a great way to have everything concentrated in the same space. So if you have any work in progress or you have any images that you want to share, the chat doesn't only take text or links, but it also takes images. So take a snapshot, put it in the chat, and then we'll all see the image, the work in progress. And that works really well on our end because we'll be able to pull it and then show it and share it with everyone. So know that that's really efficient, and we used it. Thanks, Jen, for discovering it last time. So it was really helpful. Um, okay, so I am just and Julie, it's such a pleasure to reconnect. Thank you so much. We just disconnected the audio and the video right now because we're recording, and we thought that this would be a great way to save the content, but we're going to open the microphones and video later. It's just really good to, okay, fantastic. Really good to connect with you all. We hit our target. I hit to talk like that. So this is going to be happening every month for sure. And we are hoping that we can increase the number of people joining us so we can do it like bi-weekly, twice a month. So, but we were really thrilled that we were able to, remain consistent with this. So it's just going to take me a minute to connect my phone. It's just so we have the other camera. So just bear with me 1 minute because things are like so all over the place. Every update. Hold on one sec because I just need to find the option. And the option is here. Hold on. Um, Copy invitation. Okay, and then it's just so amazing. I woke up this morning and I thought, yeah, it's a 10, and it's just ridiculous. Um, I was still prepping by 9:58, which is insane. And the last thing I wanted to do was to set up the second camera. So I'm just going to do it like right now. 865, because I want to show you my palette, 90, 92, I think, 2650. Okay, perfect. Recording in progress. Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah. I think that's good. And okay, all right. So okay, perfect. Just gonna do this. Hold on 1 second. And hi, Chloe, by the way. It's nice to see you. And let me just see if I have this. It should be happening, right? I mean, hold on 1 second. Okay, so I don't know why this is not happening. Oh, I need to check from my phone. Okay, okay. All right, so I'm just gonna do this really quickly. Okay, so this was my last step. So this was my setup. I started doing 9 by 12. I just had this like cradle board. Um, and just because we're painting wood this week, I just wanted to paint on wood. And I had these like wood panels that I haven't used. So, and I'm going to show you something that I used to prep it. But this was my sketch, and I'm just planning to show you a little bit of charcoal if you are initiating something. But I'm just going to give you another preview of the palette because it has changed. And I think this is really important. To make my life like easy and have everything super ready, I just carry everything with me because there's nothing more frustrating than wanting to paint and then just feeling procrastination kicking in and thinking I have to prep everything or my brushes are not ready but one of the things that I wanted to mention is the fact that we use like a specific paper palette that is sold um, as a pack and we've always painted like that because when you paint and you paint directly on the palette and it accumulates. It could be really hard to make to blend. So we'd like to set thing up. Yeah, let me just hold on a second. Yes, set things up with with a paper palette. But the ones in the art store are really professional. But I'm just going to show you what I use. Okay, this is like parchment paper sheets for baking. Um, and they're 200 sheets for less than $10. And I use them because they are waxed. And when you put the paint on top of it, it doesn't absorb. And for the amount of time that I paint, it's just absolutely perfect. So if you haven't done it yet and you want to have like a truckload of palette paper and you want the cheapest possible, just get this because it's amazing. And we'll tell you another great feature, two great features why this is amazing. Let's say you're painting and you want to transport your palette and you don't have anything with you and you don't have one of the boxes that we're going to tell you about. You can always put another wax paper on top and the palette will be easy to transport. So this is not only good to put the paint on top, but also to transport paint. We went on retreats and we had to transport the paintings from where we were. We had to either ship them or carry them with us in the plane. Well, guess what? If you have paint and it's really wet and you don't have a ton of it, you can actually put this wax paper on top, and it's not going to be super immaculate because if the paint is very clumpy, it's just going to stick with it. But it was amazing in our last trip to the UK. It was really amazing to see how we were able to transport. Actually, no, to Italy. Sorry, right, Jen? It was Italy the last time we did this. I think it was. We were able to transport this with us without any problem. We were able to stack all the paintings. Okay, good. And when we got home, we opened our suitcases and then we removed the wax paper, and the paintings were perfect. They were perfect, and we painted until the last day. We packed everything the next day and then we left. So this was an absolute lifesaver, and I haven't seen anything. It's a trade secret. We haven't seen anything or anyone kind of like using it, unless you know of someone. But it's a lifesaver to transport wet paintings and pack them together. And sometimes, I mean, Charlotte, you probably will know this. There are boxes that are sold that you can slide the paintings inside, and they have this compartments almost, or these rods where you can slide them. But you have to have the perfect board. You have to have everything ready, and you just don't know if you're going to paint more than the allocated number of paintings. So just so you know, it doesn't matter the support. We painted on wood panel on Masonite. So this was actually the best thing ever because we were able to carry the paintings with us and not leave them behind for someone else to ship the paintings. Also, there were some painters who left earlier. They didn't stay the whole time, so they literally just painted and they had to catch a flight. And we sandwich everything with wax paper. Doesn't matter the brand, it's not like a specific better brand or anything. I got this on Amazon if you want to just take a snapshot, or we'll put it in the chat. But I bought this like last year and I still have a ton. In fact, this was, I don't know, maybe we'll just have some Jen for our sessions because it works super well. So as you know, I simplified. Today I have my palette ready for those of you who haven't joined us last month or in the sessions. Uh, okay. Okay, yes. So never mind. I just had this like close, but yeah. But essentially, is there a brand? The Parchment. I don't know if there is a brand. It doesn't say. And they're recyclable, by the way. So they have all the. I can put this in the chat, but essentially, uh, yeah, it's just pretty good. And I think they're made in the US, which is great. And 9 by 13, they're a little bit bigger than the usual. Um, okay, perfect. And So yeah, so some of you, okay, thanks, Jen. Some of you don't know, but I just reduced my palette even further. We had a palette of, I believe, 9 or 10 colors, and we had a private session with Darlene once, and then it was an epiphany. I don't know exactly what we were doing, but um, I decided to actually reduce the palette to only 4 colors or 4 paints. Um, I'm using titanium white. I've been using this for months and I absolutely love it. I'm using Payne's Gray, which is the cold black. I'm using burnt sienna and I'm using yellow ochre. I can make so many colors with those, and I'll explain why I did this. But essentially, this dark blue, because it's really cold, is my um, primary blue. This is my primary red, and this is my primary yellow. So what I'm doing is I'm using a primary palette essentially, but instead of using the blue, yellow, and red, I'm using a neutral version of the blue, a neutral version of the red, and a neutral version of the yellow ochre. I highly recommend to give it a shot. Um, it just it's much more difficult to paint with a limited palette, for starters. So don't think that this facilitates necessarily because you have to create the colors, but it just sets the right discipline, the right habit, the right approach, and it facilitates painting. Um, Thanks, Jen. A ton. This is my paint box. It's a Ziploc from Blick. I have the 4 tubes. I have the putty, which is to me indispensable. This is not how it comes, but this is kind of like the putty, the museum putty, um, and a rag, and this is it. So I take this with me. I have a studio in downtown, and sometimes I have it since I have it always in the car. I don't have to think about packing, and that's what I love it. But also from a conceptual point of view, our subjects are all over the place. We painted. We're painting firewood. We started with people meditating, and then the eclipse, and then the camellia, and then people underwater. So you could argue that conceptually our work may be thematically not consistent, which I don't believe that's the case because I never had issues or problems presenting my work to somebody and telling me, oh, you're not painting only this, never occurred to me. But the fact that I use a very simplified palette, it gives the paintings consistency in style. And I feel that that creates a thread that ties all my work together. So not only I feel this is like the most distilled palette that I could make, but I feel like stylistically, since I paint all over the place subject wise, it brings everything together for someone who doesn't know where the concepts of the paintings come from. They don't feel disrupted by this idea that, oh, this painter is kind of like all over the place. Never. It's always the style and the way my gaze and style develop each subject. The benefits of having subjects all over the place as well is that whenever I have an opportunity to submit work, I had a studio visit, it went really well, and the person was able to pick and choose whatever theme she felt was fitting to the show that she was curating. So having multiple subjects, let's call it like that. I don't know. It'll be interesting later today. I mean, later on when we open the microphones and the video. If you agree with that statement, when I'm thinking of you, Julie, if you have like visitors when you do the open studio, if that has ever been an issue for you, like painting like different themes. I know that the idea is that we should all paint like the same subject. I go to gallery openings and then I see themes, but there's a reason for it, that artist has been represented and they create a collection specifically for the gallery. So when they create a collection that could last like months or more than a year, they are more focused in one subject that they want to talk about, and they're working around. Um, so there's almost like a retail perspective of creating a collection based on a show that it's already, it's already going to happen. But when you're practicing and you're creating and you're taking opportunities to do an exercise like this, but then you do a commission that you know re- needs a study, and then you do something for a portrait competition, and then you start accumulating a lot of work. It's totally fine. It's not. It doesn't make you less of an artist or less professional. Keeping a palette so consistent um, creates a thread that ties everything together. All right. For some reason, I just don't know. I'm going to use either my iPad. I think I'm going to use my iPad. I think I will, because I lost the image, uh, the photo reference. I'm going to see if I can just send it to myself, or if I'm going to be able to do that. But um, before I do that and I start mixing, I promise I'm going to start painting today. I will paint just in case. Um, I just put a little sketching page. I think it would be a good idea to actually send myself. Sorry, this is a bit chaotic, but I just want to send myself this image. If I can find it, I will find it. It's okay. It doesn't have to be. I will find it somewhere else. Um, Let me see if I can find it right here. I'll find it right here. I just want to give you a little. If you're starting a painting, um, I just put a small piece of paper to talk a little bit about how to start. Firewood, and the ones that I used. A really challenging subject, by the way, but so good. Okay, here we go. And sorry, I hate this little interruptions, but it will be okay. It will be okay. It will be okay. I got it. Okay, I got it. Sorry. Perfect. And then I will just make this on all the time. Display and brightness. Okay. All right. Here we go. Oops. Uh, just a quick intro. Okay, perfect. And I'm just gonna go back. Okay. Oh yeah. Okay, good. Oh, okay, 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 okay. Yeah, I had the volume. All right. Thanks. Okay, perfect. Um, so anyhow, charcoal, obviously, and I do a silhouette, um, and always a silhouette first. I always talk about the distinction between focal point and everything else, focal point and everything else. Whether you're working from a photograph, or you're just doing plein air, or working from live, or you have a figure, or you do a still life, my it's always been like that. Our very first approach, even before composition, is always, what's the focal point? How many focal points do I want? What's everything else? What's background? What's the non-tangible stuff. Focal point is the tangible, the physical, the present, the thing that has weight, the thing that occupies space, and the I wouldn't say the focus. Focal point doesn't mean the focus of your painting, but that thing that is physical and occupies space. The background is the non-tangible, the context, the scene, um, the stage, the background, whatever you want to call it. But it's always very important. Traditionally, we've mentioned this like many times, and I do believe in the value of tradition. It's just so funny that um, there's something really important about knowing the rules. I think I don't know exactly who said it and when, but it was a long time ago. Someone mentioned don't put more than three focal points in a painting. Um, Obviously, they were very orthodox in that approach, but the reasoning was that the more focal points you put in a painting, the more it gets diluted. Now, there are advantages about putting more than three focal points. You create a different type of painting. And I want to talk about the immediacy book because there's a part at the end in the conclusion that actually ties with the idea of. Um, Actually, I'm just going to mention it right now, and you tell me. You guys tell me in the chat if you have any notes. All right, so we are reading Immediacy by Anna Kornbluh, or Kornblue. I'm not sure how to pronounce her name. And um, it ties with artistic expression somehow. It's highly academic and very philosophical, but it's amazing. For her, immediacy is a, a culture that approaches things in a very simplified way. It's all about speed and blah blah blah, and removing the medium. And towards the end, he puts two examples of what's in immediacy and what's the opposite, mediacy. And I think they tie. I'm gonna make sure that they tie with because I want to. We want to do a session in January that actually ties with this. Speaking of, I think Charlotte, you asked this before if we were gonna when we met in Geneva. As an example of immediacy, she brings up the book that Kim Kardashian published of selfies, and the book was titled "Selfish," and it's 448 pages, 2 pounds, almost 2 pounds of photographs, or selfies of photographs of herself. And she's very good at not discrediting or criticizing the book, or getting to personal attacks. But she's just explaining that this encapsulates the idea of immediacy. There's no medium, you are the medium. There's no painting. You take the photograph, and this is what immediacy. It's one example, and then she puts the example, the opposite of this, and I'm gonna close my argument. There is a Canadian photographer, and perhaps you can. Uh, uh, Here we go. You can just Google his work. So he is known for taking aerial photographs of land from a helicopter, and we've seen this before. So bird's eye view of run-ups of oil sludge, or run-ups of agriculture, um, whatever. So things that pollute the earth, but um, when you look at them from the perspective that he takes the photograph, they look like abstract paintings. They are stunning and gorgeous and colorful and beautiful. So why does Anna Kornbluh say that this is the opposite? First of all, immediacy. Um, yeah, I think that's a good idea, Janice. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So immediacy um, uh, does a lot of close-ups, and mediacy pulls back. And one of the descriptions about, oh, okay, thanks, Jen, is that the Instagram? Okay, perfect. Um, so the idea is to one of the things about mediacy is to have as many focal points as possible. So this was like my closing argument is that sometimes having more than three um, focal points, it's precisely the conceptual reasoning why you want to do it. And in his case, the idea is to slow down the viewer and making sure that someone doesn't just swipe or walk away fast. If you have something that it's pulled back and has many points, focal points on the same scene, you're going to create fragmentation of the gaze, and you're going to invite people to actually wander on your painting further. So um, that's the argument about incorporating more than three focal points. But essentially, going back to the sketch, focal point, and yes, Janice, I think it would be a good idea. Just concentrate. If you have charcoal, that's the best because look what I'm doing. I'm wiping off and I'm rebuilding. So if you work from a photograph or from live, one of the aspects doesn't matter what medium you're using. You're going to have to what we call retrofit. You're going to have to retrofit whatever you're seeing onto the um, format, and that's the challenging part. It's not the likeness or to make it real. It's sometimes the layer that we have to think about in our brains about not only looking at where things are, but how to adjust them to our format. It's what's challenging. And more so painting plein air because we don't have a photograph and we don't have anything that's confined, and that's why sometimes it's a good idea to take a photo of whatever you're painting, even though that creates a whole set of problems, a new whole set of problems. But the idea is that you'll have to retrofit. And in order to retrofit your image, you have to give yourself room to make changes once you have the silhouette. Because I'm using an image that it's not the same proportion, height and width as this. And most likely it's going to be very, very difficult to have the exact same one. It's not an impediment for doing it a sketch. It just means that you will have to actually move things around a bit. Uh, One of the things about immediacy that we could apply to the creative process. Immediacy as a premise, as a not only as a culture but as a mindset, is obsessed with exactitude. It's obsessed with making things as quote unquote real as possible. Um, so much so that it goes even beyond the skin. One of the sections is about film, and he talks about TV shows, and he talks about how we're not content enough with explaining a medical condition. We have to create a documentary that has a camera that goes inside whichever orifice you can imagine and then finds whatever illness. I love the parallel between this idea of up close and as real as possible, and how it translates to cultural manifestations in film, but also in painting. It's like we have to be looking at exactly what it is that's happening. And that's why mediacy, what we're doing is to pull back and not be obsessed about exactitude. Um, we've always talked about this, but I never imagined that there was an academic or philosopher that created this idea of how to quote unquote fight against immediacy by actually giving you the tools to understand that pulling back, stepping back, creating distance, not only from a focal point, from a point of view, but also from not doing too much to it, could be the antidote to immediacy. So this is my silhouette, and that's my retrofitting, if that helps. So I always try to incorporate the outline, Janice, always the outline, because it allows me to see how the rest of the space interacts with the edges of the format. So one of the things that we make over and over again, we make a silhouette and we forget that we have a format. And our focal point looks not centered the way we want to. So I stop myself, I don't go further. I know that I painted for decades and I know that I will do this. And if I don't think about it, my painting subject will not be in the position that I want it to be. It just happens in every painting. And that means that maybe it's too close to one edge, or maybe there's too much area on another one, or maybe I just wanted to crop it and it's not cropped enough. So that's why I never go further with my sketch, further than the silhouette. It's the perfect stage to make changes and retrofit whatever alteration, exaggeration, and distortion, which, by the way, not only they are welcomed, by they're encouraged, so they don't look like the photograph, as I want. And then once I have this, I can go and start doing some lines inside. So it just feels like it's a really fast and quick process, but it's a very thoughtful process. My mind is not focused. Oh yeah. My mind is not focused on likeness. I don't, and I've trained my mind not to be focused on likeness because I think that's the trap. My mind, it's focused on positions. I don't care if I paint a duck or an eggplant or someone holding split firewood. I always think relationships. What's this line in relationship to this edge? What is this line in relationship to this height? Um, it's not like it's a frustrating process. It's a safeguard. I know that likeness will come at some point, and I will be able to manipulate that. But think of positions and relationships between those positions and other stuff in your work. And other stuff is most likely or uh, uh, primarily the format. Okay, so and yeah, I'm just gonna dedicate, yeah, maybe just a little bit. I just want to start painting as well. But usually this process takes me an hour. It just takes me an hour. Palette just fell. Okay. So anyhow, oh, what happens with the volume? Oh no, something's happening with the volume. Ah, ah. All right, hold on one second. My volume. Okay, okay. Can you hear me? So, Jen, can you hear me? Um, okay. Can you hear me now? For some reason. Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you, thank you. Sorry, I don't know that, the volume starts, sometimes the volume looks like it's pressed for some reason. Okay. All right, I'll just leave it like that. If you guys can't hear me, just let me know. But my volume just went like whoop by itself. So, yeah. Anyhow, something must be some happening in this room, you know. with the palette and this, but you just let me know. Thanks, Jen. Okay, so I would just go like an hour, about an hour, just working on this and manipulating. So the idea of there's a reason why charcoal is our choice in this process. It is our choice because it's easy to manipulate. So because this is a process and it requires building and establishing relationships, you want a medium that allows you to make changes as you discover more relationships. Um, we're always a fan of using charcoal rather than using paint. Some people go straight directly to painting, and that's absolutely great. And but by that I mean they use a small brush and then a bit of the um, solvent, and then they just kind of like start sketching with the brush. Perfectly fine. But you have to understand that if you want to make any retrofitting changes, you won't be able to have the opportunity to redo it as easily. So the only thing that requires is more confidence. I know that there are some people in this group that prefer to go straight up with brush and a bit of like solvent and paint, and that works better because it just doesn't have this idea of reworking something, and then you can always rework things as you paint later. So the drawing aspect doesn't end with the charcoal, but just know that it's uh, much easier. Okay, great, thank you, Chloe. So this is just uh, perfect. Amazing. Well, thanks for sharing this, and as you know, you can share any work in progress. Um, and let me just use this as an example, Chloe, and I'll just talk. I'm going to move to painting, but I'll just talk this about this right now. So if you can see it. What do I look at when I see something composed? Obviously, focal points. There are several focal points here, and I'm glad that you're actually uh, studying this a little bit. You have the portraits, but you have this hand. This is a focal point. Hands are the second most expressive thing after the face. Give a lot of importance to the face, and it does have a lot of importance. But in this image right here, this is as important. Things to look for: the distance between focal points and edges of the painting. So this is nice because the eye level, it's a bit higher than the middle of the painting, but it's not too close to the top. So you're giving some room for our eye to actually just kind of like go around the figure. Sometimes I have a friend who's a painter, and this is what she does. She has this helmet um, that is able to track the movement of the eye. And then she asks someone to look at a painting, a very traditional Renaissance painting, famous painting. So she asks them to look at the painting, and while they're contemplating or looking at the painting, the device tracks the eye movement. Then she takes the eye movement as a map. It's just the direction or the path the eye of the viewer took to look at that painting. And then she creates an abstract version of that painting, but looking at the eye movement of the person who looked at it. And it creates these swirls. You look at that painting and it's an abstract painting. But then you learn that it's a version of the painting, but based on the eye movement. I'm going to share the name of this artist because she's insanely amazing. Sorry, I know that this word is problematic, but anyhow, this idea that you need to look at your work compositionally from the perspective of someone who's looking at a painting. You're not just the artist when you paint, you're the artist and the audience. You have to be both. You have to act or execute something. You have to step back and pretend that you're looking at this at a museum, at a gallery, and it's hanging, and you're spending some time looking at it, and then it's not like you want to find what's wrong with it, because I think there's something not necessarily healthy about it, but you just want to be as impartial and objective. And one of the things that you need to do is to look at the eye movement. I know that this is maybe a little bit too deep of uh, how you are analyzing that painting. That's going to give you clues. I look at this, you'll see my pointer. If this was too close to the edge, my eye movement would stop. That creates a tension point. Compositionally, that painting would have been weak because you're not allowing the flow of the eye movement to actually go on the painting and create an unobstructed dance. So this is what I don't look at likeness. I don't look at this as proportionate. It's not proportionate. That is not important right now. The way you frame the focal points is important. And thanks for starting to kind of like do um, the wash. I think that's very good. So yeah, I like these intriguing cropped elements. So there's obviously, I love that there's a diagonal. This kind of like creates a bit of an imbalance. Everything that's parallel or perpendicular to the corners of your format, to the edges of your format, will get kind of like magnetized, will amplify that. So if this table would have been horizontal, it would have flattened that image. Why? Because a horizontal line here would have been seen by us as a replication of a horizontal line on the edge. This doesn't seem important, but it's crucial. Just because it's tilted, it creates perspective. Any line on a painting, if it's vertical or horizontal, it doesn't create space. Diagonal lines create perspective. You don't have to know anything about perspective whatsoever. Just know this. If your painting has straight lines and they are vertical and horizontal, you're going to create flatness. You're not going to invite someone to associate a line with depth. This is the perfect example. So great. So Chloe, I would just continue. I know that you went straight up without any shading. So I'm not calling you out, but I'm just telling you, warning. I can tell you this. So check your darks and your lights. Place your darks first because it's very linear. There's a lot of like linear elements, and that's great. But usually from the linear, we go to the shading. So the next step after you put some elements, you kind of like establish from dark to light, and you use the side of the charcoal, and that allows you to remove. Oops, I'm sorry, to remove the line work and create edges. So thanks for sharing, Chloe. This is just perfect. Oh, great. Um, Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Janice. Yeah, yeah, it's a good idea. You could actually jump and you don't have to, because with the firewood, I sent an email a few days ago about realizing that this is about texture. It's not so much about the shape. So it's a perfect idea. You could just kind of like jump and then go to painting. Here's my advice. Start always with the darker areas. So create like a, whatever the image is, create a mixture. It doesn't have to match at all, with darker areas and then block them out. Uh, okay, perfect. And and did you? Okay, perfect. All right. So, Charlotte, if you want to share anything, just let me know. But essentially, yeah. So this concludes a bit of a. Oh my God. Um. Yeah, I think I have. Yeah, I do. I do. I have some oil left. So I'm gonna put some oil, and I need to set up my. Oh, and so start with a layer that it's more solvent and less paint. When you start painting, like the example, Chloe's example is perfect. The paint doesn't have to be thick. Make it thin, make it sheer. Um, so, um, oh, thanks, Chloe. So yeah, this is my second, I think it's my second layer. But notice that there's layers that are very sheer here. They're very transparent. So you need to get a bit of the solvent first, a bit of the paint, um, and then essentially just kind of like block out areas that are darker. I would recommend darker to lighter. Also, very traditional approach, darker to lighter. They don't have to be blended, so don't worry about things being contained exactly, because At the beginning of the process, everything's a bit all over the place. It bleeds out. It's not sharp. So the idea of like oil is that we are revisiting areas over and over again and then refining them and polishing them. So don't worry too much about now this looking like um, a mess in the sense that it's not contained. Oil is not markers, is not acrylic. There's a difference between oil and acrylic. I'll briefly mention acrylic was invented when oil became part of our life in regards of like byproducts um, made out of oil, plastics, and everything else. And then paint was created, and it was first used for advertisement because it's very graphic, it dries fast, it's clean edge. So that was the initial function of acrylic painting. And I always mention it because it's what it does best. Um, I'm not saying that we cannot use acrylic for fine art. I'm obsessed sometimes in the wrong way with painters who do hyper realism and they use acrylic because that is like I can't find an analogy for it, but it's like you're telling me that you can breathe underwater and you just found a system that you're able to do it. Are you designed to breathe underwater? No, we're not designed for that, but someone just made it happen. Is that it's amazing? Probably it is amazing, but it's not natural. Oh my gosh, I'm using really terrible terms. So that would be the idea with acrylic. It has a specific function. Can it be used for blending and sfumatos and softness? Yes, it can. You just have to learn how to do it. It's harder than oil. It's more difficult. It's frustrating, and it just doesn't feel like it doesn't have the natural ability to do that. Oil does. It's easier to paint with oil. So don't worry about these elements because you'll be able to and you can use your fingers or you can use the rack if you want to blend a little bit. But the idea is to block out darker to lighter. Why? Um, in oil and in any painting, acrylic, uh, in this case, it also applies. Um, you have a scene in front of you, okay? Whether it's a photograph or it's being outside. Um, and sometimes we get caught up with detail, okay? We are sort of like we become immediacy people. Detail, 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 leaves, ripples on the water. I don't know, a frog. We want details because we think that's gonna, and we forget about the light in the scene. That is the most important thing in the painting. Um, so organizing, okay, I'm going to go to this, Charlotte. This is beautiful. Organizing the light in a painting is a priority. And oil, it's always been like that, darker to lighter, and then lean to oily, which I'll talk in a minute. Why? Because you're creating not just a stained glass window where everything's compartmentalized, you're creating an illusion of a scene. And what creates the illusion is the light reflecting on every surface. Therefore, the light quality, the amount of light reflection is the most important thing. When you organize your first colors on the work, start from darker to lighter. Why? Two reasons. You want to create a scale of light. Like, otherwise, we are completely overwhelmed by the different shades. We don't know what to do and where to start. But in order to make a scale, you have a beginning and an end. You have to start somewhere because the idea is to organize the different values of light on your painting. So that's why it's always a good idea in that approach to organizing the values. Or forget about the subject. It doesn't matter what we paint, but organizing the values. The value is the amount of light reflected on a surface. A dark valued A dark value, meaning little bit of light, we call it a shadow. A light value, meaning a highlight, we call it a highlight anyhow. So I just wanted to kind of like correlate the idea of value, what it is, and how we use it, shadows and highlights. When you create a scale, you're actually knowing in your scene what's going to be the area of your scene that's going to reflect the least light versus the area that's going to reflect the most light. You are integrating the light structure or the light rules in your painting. That's going to literally recreate the illusion of what you're painting best. So organizing the values is more important than if the nose is protruding or not. The second reason why darker to lighter is best, darker sets a very strong graphic point. It's an anchor point on your painting. When you set the darker spots or the darker area, sometimes it's black, but sometimes it could be beige. It doesn't mean like it's always black. But when you set those points, they become so graphic that they actually allow you to anchor your shadows where you'll be able to expand from there. So they become graphic anchor points. It's easier to paint from those darker points out than not knowing I'm painting an ear now or I'm painting. It's too overwhelming not to know a path forward. So darker to lighter. First, organizing the scale of values. Second, setting up your graphic anchor points because they're darker. And I would say there was a third, and I forgot. I forgot the third one, but I think those two are pretty much. There was a third one. Um, oh yes, the third one. It is about the. It's a technical aspect with oil that feels very counterintuitive. It's easier to paint lighter over darker. I know that it sounds crazy, but if you do a layer that's lighter, you paint the flower and you do the highlight because you like that pale yellow. It's just beautiful, and you want to incorporate it. So you clock it, but then you realize, oh my gosh, it's not that light. Actually, the shape is a little bit different, and there's this shadow that kind of like comes in. You realize of this because you're working on it. It's not like you have to realize of everything before you start working, because that's not what happens. As you paint, you discover. As you paint, you see. Painting is a way of discovering the truth of the subject that you're painting. It takes time though, but you realize that petal, it's not really pale. There's a dash of orange on it that you want to incorporate or you want to maybe cut in from the side. What happens? The lighter paint will not allow you to make it darker. It's as if it's resisting and pushing against it. And you feel, okay, just I want to make it darker. And then you put some orange and it's not taking it. Um, there are ways of overcoming this. It happens in every painting. If it doesn't happen, it must be that we're not painting because it always happens. Um, the idea is that you set your darker first. And why is that? When you set the darker first, you allow the darker to set a little bit, which you would argue that it happens with lighter as well. But for some reason, I don't know, it just feels like it sets. And then the key of adding lighter on top and not allowing it to resist is that you use a lighter pressure. I don't know exactly the chemical reaction to it, but painting a lighter area over a darker is always easier. So that's the third reason why darker first, always in oil. In acrylic, you don't have to follow that rule. It's better to follow that rule for the two main first reasons: organizing the scale and the anchor points. But technically, you don't have to follow the third one, which is you'd argue that that's easier because you don't have to think. You put lighter, you put white underneath. You just it dries and you put darker on top. It creates a whole set of problems, and the not the greatest approach to painting. But with oil, you have to consider that darker to lighter always. And as you move to the lighter palette, less pressure, unless the painting is dry. Okay, so Charlotte, let me open this commission, and then I'm just gonna share it. 1 second. Um, all right, so this is great. Let me just move this. Um, looking at Okay, so I'm looking at compositions. Okay, I'm just gonna go for it. A couple of things. Obviously, I'm looking at compositions. I know that there's this point that touches and it creates an enclosure on this upper part and the bottom part, which is fine. Sometimes when that happens, I don't go crazy. It's just what it is. And then there are many examples of paintings in which there's an interruption on the composition and no explanation needed. Nobody is going to go as deep as analyzing a painting and say, oh, I'm not going to buy it because the ear touches the edge. Nobody has ever done that. Maybe and if someone did, they're total jerks. But and obviously you have the limitation that you had an image that you had to work with. But I just think like this is really nice. It's not too close to the top. I love that this body is cropped right here, so it invites you to think that there's more of the horse in that area. So this actually can balance the composition, you know, hot point on the other side. The idea that this mass is cropped, and anything that's cropped informs you psychologically that there's a continuation that you're invited to imagine. And in this case, we are invited to imagine that this kind of like continues. Um, so yeah, I think it's really. I mean, I would just move forward to treating like different areas. Okay, so there's something I wouldn't change it at all, but there's something about this angle. Let's talk about diagonals. So you have this really beautiful angle right here, and then it has an angle that I feel like this could have been a little bit more angled. There's something beautiful about this arch right here, and the fact that there's this section, there's this angle that kind of like cuts in, and I feel like this could have been. I mean, it just depends on how much time you want to invest. Here's the thing with commissions. Sometimes we feel like our life it's at stake when we paint something to somebody else. No, it's not only it's not, but you decide. I'm gonna be like honest. If it's a gift, it's a different story because there's something that you want to do uh, that has value because you find value in another person, and therefore that's a different story. But if you are commissioned something because you are getting paid, you have to see how much they're paying you and how much you want to invest in your work. This could be uh, done and finished the way it is right now, Charlotte. So it just looks beautiful and it does its job. It just depends on how much further you want to go. Sometimes we feel like we want to go further because our reputation is at stake, and I just be careful with that because then we end up investing unpaid labor that so just know that. But things that I would do here, I would increase that angle. I would maybe lengthen a bit more. Then there's something elegant about that length. I feel like this is very straight and parallel to the leather, the strip of leather. So I would just round this up a little bit. There's something beautiful about the distinction between straight line and organic line. And I feel like this is something that I would do, for example. And then I would use non-conforming brushstrokes. For anyone who's hearing this for the first time, when we have a shape like this one, we have a tendency of using the brushstroke direction in the same direction as the shape that we're painting next to. Um, Perfect example is when we paint eyes, we paint the eyelash following the same direction, but then we paint the eyelid, we follow the same direction. And then we paint the eyebrow and we follow the same direction. There is this thing that we do where we follow the same direction as the shape that we have nearby. It doesn't have to be like that. In fact, in painting, it's better not to follow it because it looks too predictable sometimes. So what I would do in this area, I see these like swipes of brushstroke. I would start using a non-conforming, meaning not following that area. I would just stipple maybe um, some because there's texture right here. Stipple some and then follow a different brush stroke. I have okay. My second approach, uh, the choice of background. Okay, I know that this is non-defining, it's blurry, and the depth of field is concentrated on the horse. And I know that you incorporated some green and you expanded it, but that comes with conceptual consequences. um, and I feel like sometimes it is unconscious on a viewer's eye, but I love the green up here. I would say this green has a lot of blue in it, so it just feels almost like artificial. I'm using words um, a bit harsh, but I would just make it more botanical looking. And I would also, the strokes feel very sharp. There's something beautiful about the depth of field. So I would just smoke it or blur it. So it really gets pushed back. The risk or the hot zone or the danger, it's not, nothing is bad. When we use something that's highly saturated, first it comes close to us, where it's not pushed back. Um, it just really comes really close and we flatten the image. Um, Saturation comes close and sharpness in the brushstroke also comes close. So the issue is not the choice of color and whether we push it lower or not. It's mostly the style of the brushstroke. Keep this sharper here because it brings it closer and it creates this painterly look. You don't have to polish it, you don't have to blend it. It's really good. Push this back by, I would even consider desaturating it a bit. It could look green, but it doesn't have to be that bright of a green. You're gonna create, when you do that, psychologically, you're creating this idea that the horse is in a big space. You don't have a horizon line. You don't have sky. You don't have a line of trees. You don't have anything that grounds this foliage. It feels very cropped and pasted. Push it back, desaturate it, blur it. If you ask me, I love this palette right here because it creates contrast. Anything that has high contrast, it's a gold mine. I feel like this is not giving the potential that it could be. What I things that run through my head. Does it really have to be green? I love the fact that there is harmony in colors here and colors in the background. Almost there's something about this softness of harmonious palette that travels outside the horse. It feels like it's not a harsh, disassociating subject. You have the horse, and the horse is somewhere that color coordinates. Color coordination is so beautiful. What if you just incorporate it a little bit? Anyhow, that those are my thoughts. Okay. Yes, glazing that works. Yeah, glazing absolutely. I'm assuming it's already dry, so I would just glaze it. Of course, I wouldn't second coat it. Second coating should be the absolute last resort in oil painting. There's always something that could be upcycled in a painting. We may end up why do I mean by second coating? You know, when we paint a wall and we put a coat and it's not opaque enough, and when we have to put a second coat because we have to make sure that it covers whatever's underneath, that works with furniture and walls and chairs and I don't know, anything that needs to look painted. Never use it in oil. Don't initiate a paint a layer with the intention of blocking with one coat. Don't second coat anything. Start with a glaze. Start with like some pixelation. Change the edge, perhaps. Eventually, it will get covered. I'm not saying that you always have to use transparency, but second coating, it's sacrilegious because there's always something to be used, even if you want to change the direction of a painting. Like in this case, think about it, Charlotte. This is only feedback. You know the client better, you know the intentions, everything's valid, everything makes sense from the point of view that we approach it. But if you make a decision after your reflection that maybe that's something that you want to test, start slowly. Do a glaze or just do it on the border. Never go full throttle on a painting that has something that all of a sudden it gives you, how you're shocked that this happened on your painting, and it's like, oh my gosh, and you feel like you just want to get like a roller and go over it. Try not to make impulsive decisions on a painting ever. Test your reasoning with a small section. Why? First of all, you don't know what's going to happen. I may just say something, or you may just say something to yourself that you may think, okay, this is wrong. And it may not be true. And if you just kind of like do a bold, then you're like, okay, you're on free fall. And we know what that feels like on a painting because it means like there's no floor. You always try to find something to grab on, but you feel like you're on free fall. Just test it first and then ask yourself, does this work? If it does, then just do it, continue. If it doesn't, wipe it off. Nothing happened. Reflect a little more and then change something. But the idea is that sometimes we become impulsive with our execution. And then we cross over a point of no return. And then we're like, oh, well, it's like we have a shelf and nothing's glued, and the shelf tilts and everything falls off the shelf. That point where everything falls off the shelf, that we can't stop it. It happens with painting. You just do something and you're very impulsive when you do it. We are very impulsive because it happens with every painting. And then the whole center of gravity of your painting and your decisions slips through. And then it's when you either want to throw that painting away or cut it or painting over it, which I have paintings that I want to, very few, I have to say, to not to brag about this, very few that I want to I want to make them disappear. There's always something in a painting that gives you an opportunity to test. So test. Um, yeah, I think so. So just gonna, if you have any questions, any topics. I'm gonna do a little bit more work. I'm gonna explain where I'm at and what I'm doing. But in about 15 minutes, I'm gonna stop the recording and then um, we'll just leave it. Recording wise, we'll leave it at that, and then we can open microphones or not. It completely optional. So just want to make sure we want to make sure that you don't feel like you have to present yourself or. Um, and we were talking precisely yesterday at the Everly how Henry is uh, one of the subjects is public speaking, and they were doing slam poetry. I think slam poetry. Correct me, Jen, but I think that's what a beautiful poem. And I was listening to you, Jen, and I was reflecting on how I wished that I had this sort of like um, subject in school growing up because I just feel like public speaking, it's difficult, and especially as an artist, you have to do a lot of it, and some of us don't have you know the training. It just requires practice, like painting. So I always approach, yeah, we always approach this from the point of view of not, it's always optional. You don't have to send anything through the text. You don't have to share anything. Um, oh, thanks for sharing that, Jen. Yeah, there's, yeah, it's so important. Such a skill. Um, and you don't have to share anything at the end of the session. We're not asking to, okay, now flip all the paintings and see what everyone did. No. So the option is there, with camera, with a microphone, and with the chat. You can email if you prefer. You can email later. Uh, Everyone has our emails, so if you want to email me a picture, and then we can just discuss it. But yeah, so anyhow, so time wise, it's a 13. It's the second week almost, and then we're dedicating an entire month, and I'm gonna have maybe like 2 or 3 sessions left. So I just really want to work on the veins, and that's what inspired me to write that, because it feels such a dumb material, right? It's just, I don't we've done wood before, but it just never I never felt so challenged before by a subject. And just because the richness of the texture, and that's something, texture is always the last course on any painting, if you ask me. Just because um, it's an illusion of a surface, and that feels overwhelming, even though there are tricks to approach it. Because, first of all, we don't have to do every crevice that we see. But I'm gonna spend more time with with light. I was doing some. We had a great conversation last night, but I was doing some darker areas right here, and I want the brushstroke to create uh, more like a combed um, area. Um, okay, perfect. Yeah. See, thanks, Claire, for that observation. Sometimes it's, yeah, it just happens, but anyhow, I wanted to do sort of like a comb, like scratchy. So I just had to use like a smaller brush, and I'm gonna try to do an example like here. Not put too much pressure. Like for example, I'm creating a little bit of a lighter note with this. Um, and sometimes, instead of, first of all, to create texture, um, observe the tilt of your brush. We have a tendency of always have the same angle when we paint. Um, if you paint more perpendicularly, you'll be able to create more sort of like finer lines. If you tilt it, you're going to paint with the side of the bristles. So that's going to give you more bands. So sometimes with hair or texture like this, you want to change the angle. Second is the pressure. If you want to create a texture on the horse skin or fur, barely put any pressure. Another thing that we tend to do, we always paint with the same pressure on a painting. It's and the idea is that when you gauge different pressures, you're going to get different effects on your brushstroke. So if you want to do something that is more like scratchy, um, let me see if I can find the words to explain it. Sometimes when we paint, the motion is we land the brush, we land it with, I'm not saying with an impact, but there's a point of contact. Then we drag the brush, longer, shorter, it just depends. And then it takes off. Okay? So I'm just kind of like explain the usual is landing, dragging, takeoff. If you want to do texture, there's no landing and there's no takeoff. It's sort of like you're painting with the tips of the bristles, and they slide through the surface. There's no um, place on the painting that you can identify where there's been the contact or where the brushstroke gets interrupted. You're actually in a very perpendicular way, and I'm doing a little bit darker. Not too much paint, obviously, because that's going to leave a lot, but you are essentially, and you just need a little bit. It looks a little bit like more fibrous. The idea is that I know that this is enough because when I do this, and then this area, all the minimal effects on each area will support each other, and the viewer will see the illusion of a fibrous split wood. That's all we need. We don't have to do every single one of the lines that we see. Um, since I'm gonna work on this later, but when the paint is like a bit drier, but there is also a knot, so this needs to be slightly lighter, or a wave. But again, there's no landing of my brush and there's no takeoff. So this is, I mean, this is the reason why we love these sessions. And as Jen put it last week, we don't talk about this technical stuff in our sessions. There's no time. We talk about other things that are also technical, but as much as the virtual sessions, we're not able to paint together. These are monumentally important, if you ask me, and if you ask Jen, in the sense that they could set you up for the rest of the month, and at least bring awareness when you use the brush. If you take anything from today, of all the things we talked about, think of the tilt of your brush when you paint. What happens when you just do it sideways and it creates bands? It compared to more vertical. And think of the landing, dragging, and taking off, and how if you want to create texture, you have to actually slide the brush over. It could make such a difference. And I'll tell you why. Not that I'm applying this to myself. If I don't think about this, I will use the same tilt, the same pressure, and the same stroke length everywhere. Um, and that's fine. But that's the difference between a painting that has some electricity in it and a painting that is flat. I'm using a very limited palette. I'm not using color as an effect to create some show. I have to be mindful with all these effects because that's going to create strength and electric latency on my painting. These tiny little things are have the potential for so much. Um, yeah, I think that would be the case. I'm just going to do a bit more on this area. So what do I do? My eye goes back and forth. I use the image as a reference um, just because I want to see where things are, but I'm not super conditioned by it. This is my relationship with this, because I think this is very important. I'm not subservient to it. We used this word yesterday, by the way. I'm not subservient to it. It's informing me. Okay? It's there for me to use. I'm not depending on it. I'm not judging what I do based on it. It's working for me. This is working for me. I'm not working for it. This is working for me. I want this to tell me where things are, and then I will use those things to my perspective and my criteria. And it's very important to establish, as cheesy and ridiculous as this may sound, very important to establish your boundaries with what kind of relationship you're establishing with the source. We're using observational approach. I distinct between observational versus intuition. Observational, so I'm just looking at something and translating it. I need to be clear about what kind of relationship I want to establish with the subject. Never feel like the subject directs your process. You direct the process. You make the decisions. Your work is always ahead of the image, is never behind. You are making decisions on your work based on its own journey. The image is only informing you of things that you want to um, decide. Um, so, and speaking, uh, I'm just putting words to my train of thought, essentially. Uh, so yeah, notice what I'm doing as well. I never spend too much time in one area. Um, I know myself. I feel that if I only paint one section and I don't move to the next section unless something is finished, I this would I would be like 85 years old and I would still be painting this. It would never be finished. And I just need to be realistic and honest with myself and say my life is whatever. There's a lot going on. I have this time to paint. I need to find a formula that allows me to be as efficient with my time as I can. So I cannot go linear on a painting. I cannot do the glove and tomorrow I'll do the other glove. I don't know what I'm going to be tomorrow. I don't know what I'm going to be doing. To me, efficiency is crucial. You want to really, there's so little time that we have to do this. You want that time to be as productive as you can. So do a little bit of work in one area, move somewhere else, do a little bit of work, move somewhere else, do a little bit of work. And then if you have the luxury to go back to this painting, revisit what you've done and expand it. So that will make the painting better overall. Nothing makes a painting look more unfinished than having things that are not painted. So always, if anything, with the first Janice, if anything, with the first approach, if you start a painting, cover everything. Get rid of the blank or the white, or just cover everything. Even if you have like now half an hour, just get the brush and then just put some paint and some solvent mixed together. That alone will make the painting look like it's more further away from point zero than if you spend 5 hours on the glove and everything's blank. But again, that's me. There are plenty of, if you ask me, narcissistic, egotistic, famous painters who follow the radically opposite approach. Lucian Freud. How did Lucian Freud paint? He was a nutcase. Sorry, amazing painter. The work is incredible. Nutcase. He would start with the eye. Okay, he would have a model come from 8 a.m. to 1. And then he would start with the eye. So he would be looking at the eye of the model for whatever amount of hours. And then every day the same model. And then when he would finish the eye, then he would paint the skin around it. and then a little bit more of the skin, and then a little bit more of the face, maybe the second eye. This is brilliant in the sense that every time he had a model come in, the light was different, the model was different, the position was different. So this kind of like onion layer of painting created in his paintings, there is a certain contortion of the work that it's talk about electric because he captured the model every time in a different way. He was different. The palette may be different. The season was different. His mood was different. So that's why it's a portrait of a nude figure. But it's not just that. It's beyond. It's beyond that. Uh, of course. And then at one, he had a lunch, and then from two, whatever, to six, he had another model, and then he worked on another painting, and he did the same thing. Um, his paintings took like an average of 18 months to finish. 18 months to finish. So I think you have to be a little bit of both a narcissist and a psycho to have the stamina like every day to be doing that. Um, this is impossible. Obviously, by the time he did that, he was uber famous. He didn't do that at the beginning. His paintings at the beginning are very small, and they're one session only. He has work that it's not as, but the well-known paintings, I think as his career developed and became, of course, then you kind of like really can dedicate your entire life to painting. It was never the case. There was a correlation between him being able to sustain himself with painting and approaching this. It didn't happen before. And I think that's also important to mention. We all are on a position in which we know how much time we all have to dedicate to this. And that's the time that we have. And that's this is not a judgment. It is the time that we have. So the goal obviously is to increase our amount of time because this is so freaking amazing. But I don't know. We just don't know. That doesn't mean like we don't have to do it, obviously. But it's important that my point with this circular argument is that it's important that when we do it, we are as efficient with every minute of it as we can. We want to do the best possible and the most advanced work as we can in the amount of time that we have. If it's 2 hours, let's just put our entire soul into it and do it as concentrated and focused and as I wouldn't say as fast, but as productive. Yeah, as productive as we can. There's a going back to the book that is changing our lives. We have like our book club talks on Tuesday in the afternoon. One of the chapters of the book, she talks about the difference between circulation and production. She talks about it in financial terms, and it's really amazing how she puts it together. But she also talks about art process wise. Circulation is doing things for the sake of doing. Circulation doesn't need an excuse. The only reason to exist is to do more of it. Uh, Immediacy loves circulation. That's why the scrolling. That's why everything is always endless because that is more important than anything that is being created. The whole goal is just to circulate data constantly. Production doesn't work like that. When you want to produce something, it requires focus, it requires attention. Circulation only wants your attention to circulate more. So I feel like when we paint, sometimes we may have this idea of circulation as we need to put brushstrokes, we need to do a lot, we need to put layers, we need to put details. I would say stop. Think of the opposite, production. You want to be efficient, you could just maybe use barely any paint. But with your decisions and your execution, you want to elevate your work and make sure that you have an evolution that amplifies the strongest points of your painting and uh, develops the ones that feel a bit weaker. So to me, efficiency it's about um, being productive, being productive is about producing rather than circulating. Sorry, I just threw in. I know that this is kind of like a little bit abstract, and but sometimes, as you know, sometimes you read something that it may have a context, but it could really be helpful in applying it to your own um, whatever field like you're doing, And I think in every book there is something that could be metaphorically applied to uh, whatever you're doing. And in this case, since it's we're reading this because of painting, it feels really important. Does it matter that you make 100 paintings in 1 year? It doesn't matter. You could make one painting in 1 year and be this most amazing piece of work that will have longevity. I just showed a painting that I did um, in 2018, and the curator just wanted that painting, and I was a bit embarrassed because you feel like it has to be like 2023 and onward. It it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That was a piece of work that I dedicated time producing it, and that value will have longevity. It doesn't matter how much time it passes. So circulation also applies how much work what's your output? Because sometimes we feel the pressure to create a bunch of paintings, and if we don't have like a bunch of paintings, we cannot call ourselves artists, and there's a whole train of thought. Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording, and I'll just send you the link when I upload it, and then I'm gonna open the microphones and stuff. Okay, so let me see.